Janice, welcome back. Today we are yapping about everyone's favorite part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgates. I want to talk about floodgates and should they exist in Yu-Gi-Oh? Should they not exist? And well, obviously they do exist. So what do we do about the fact that I feel like we are currently in a meta, in a game state where everyone's trying to figure out, how do I search anti-spell fragrance? How do I floodgate my opponent? And what is that going to do for the longevity of the game when you have cards that literally mean your opponent can't play the games? Who doesn't love floodgates? I mean, I have a mixed opinion on it, so let's talk about it. So if you don't know what I mean when I say floodgate, you're so lucky. But basically how I would define a floodgate in Yu-Gi-Oh! It is a card that is meant to make it so your opponent literally can't play the game. Like, we're not talking, it makes it difficult, I have to play around things. I believe in its truest form, a floodgate is something that says you're just not going to be able to play the game the way it was intended. A quick Google search of Yu-Gi-Oh! Floodgates populated this list that someone was nice enough to make us of what they consider to be floodgates. And for the most part, I agree. So if we look at some examples of what I would consider classic, true floodgates, the purpose of this card is to turn your opponent's ability. They can't know, you don't get to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I get to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So Vanity's Ruler, this card cannot be special summoned. Your opponent cannot special summon monsters. I've only been around for a year. Someone let me know in the comments if there was ever a time in Yu-Gi-Oh! And if there was, how far back that was when you could play a true game with no special summons. Because extra deck summons count as special summons. So when a Vanity's Ruler hits the board against you, you get your one normal summon. And you better hope that whatever you manage to normal summon can beat over the Vanity's Ruler to send it to grave. But often, people who really love a good floodgate will try to find a way to protect that floodgate, so that might not even work in the first place. We have a fan favorite. I call this a fan favorite because while I've never played this card, I know of people. My boyfriend played this card. It was his spicy sauce in his regional, in his side deck, was to side in Denko Seka. This is also the card that I don't know if Leo would agree. My friend Leo won an OTS store championship, and he cited this in, and he may or may not agree that this was the MVP card. I watched the duel, and I was like, that was that card. So what Denko Seka says is that cannot be special summoned. While you control no set spell traps, neither player can set spell traps nor activate spell trap cards that are set on the field. Now, when we talk floodgates, I think this is where we start having the conversation of true floodgates and floodgates that you can kind of this is definitely a floodgate, yes. Depending on the deck you're playing against, because it just says neither player can set spell traps nor activate spell traps. If you are playing, for example, Elf Note, where you place, this isn't going to impact you. If you're playing quick play spells that don't have to be set before, right? Obviously anything you already have set, you're not going to be able to activate. And if you're trap heavy, this is going to shut you off. So when we have the conversation about floodgates, it's not as easy as being no floodgates. Yes, floodgates. Because some floodgates, I would argue that a floodgate like Vanity's Ruler, that's just shutting you off from the game. Denko Seka, depending on what you're playing, it's not shutting you out of the game. And I am not blameless, okay? I played Malice. I mained Di-Fi. So my opinion on floodgates is that they are always going to exist, and I feel like we have to figure out a way to make them healthy, because the idea of the card game shouldn't have floodgates. It's going to have floodgates. And I think especially for some decks, floodgates are actually somewhat necessary. If you're playing Malice in 2026, in order to win a game, because so much of our stuff has been banned, cards like D-Shifter, cards like Di-Fi, kind of necessary. I was maining 3 Di-Fis and having the time of my life. There was one point it was a casual game, I got all 3 Di-Fis out. I accidentally clogged my spell and trap zone because I had other stuff out, and that kind of was not fun. But If you've never read Di-Fi, it is a continuous spell that says any monster sent to the graveyard is banished instead. I will point out, though, and this is where I say the conversation of floodgates, I think you can't have the conversation of floodgates without talking about counters and what is and isn't a hard counter. I personally feel like in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, the things a lot of us players who are like, oh, I hate floodgates, they're not like true floodgates. They're just a really hard counter. So for example, Elf Note, you're not playing through a Di-Fi. I've been learning Luna Light. I'm reading those cards and I'm like, oh, if it's sent to grave, Luna Light is not playing through a Di-Fi. You know, anything, I think like Orchist has a lot of graveyard stuff. Anything that is reliant on the graveyard is not going to play through a Di-Fi or do well with a shifter. Mitsu? Okay. Like, there's certain decks, if it's a mirror match, if you're playing Malice and you see a Di-Fi, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to trigger all my stuff. Di-Fi, humble opinion, it's not a true floodgate. It is just a super hard counter. It becomes a floodgate depending on the deck it is playing against. And this is where the conversation of floodgates gets tricky, because I personally consider Droll and Lockbird to be a pseudo floodgate depending on the deck that is getting Droll. For anyone unfamiliar with this spicy hand trap that is now limited to 2, if Droll says, if a card is added from the deck to your opponent's hand, except during the draw phase, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. For the rest of this turn, cards cannot be added from either player's main deck to the hand. Have you played Rolad? Have you played Mitsu? Okay. What happens if I Droll you? Do you get to play the game? There's that new like casino looking gambling. I'll try to put like a picture of some of the cards. They're all dependent on drawing. Do you think if you Droll a deck that is dependent on drawing or dependent on searching, do they get to play the game? And if we're defining floodgates through the lens of my goal is to get my opponent to not play the game, it's very easy to have a very like huffy opinion about floodgates and be like, I absolutely hate them. But we're all playing Droll, I would guess. If you're not playing Droll, I think you should play Droll, because you sit down across from someone who is on Rolad and you go, well, that's everything too, where I think Droll has a little bit of a leeway too, just because of the fact that it's except during the draw phase. So like you can play around Droll, which makes it less infuriating than some floodgates that you literally can't play around. True floodgates that you can't play around. But okay, I Droll the Rolad player. I'm not going to sit there after the game and be like, floodgates, terrible, am I right? They're a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think from Vanity's Ruler, these floodgates that turn off special summoning, these floodgates that, I mean, there's a whole deck. I would say that the newest Invoked deck is basically a pseudo floodgate deck. Like, the purpose of that deck is to get monsters on your board. That I would even, if we want to even extend it past just the Invoked end board, I would say the goal of so much of modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is to create an end board that your opponent cannot play through. And floodgates are kind of just the final middle finger to your opponent when you're doing that end board. I feel like I've heard so much about this card, Anti-Spell Fragrance. I have seen so many combos of using 5 Angry Girls, I believe the card's legal name is Zena, to figure out a way, everyone's trying to figure out a way to add back a Droll or to search an Anti-Spell Fragrance. Why? Each player must set spell cards before activating them and cannot activate them until their next turn after setting them. Now, the thing with Di-Fi and the thing with Anti-Spell Fragrance, and I would even say the thing with Vanity's Ruler, is I cannot think of a single floodgate that there isn't an out to, right? You've fallen in the Virtuous, the Anti-Spell Fragrance. But that's why I'm saying floodgates, especially on-field floodgates, these continuous spells, continuous traps, even just in general, trap cards that are going to do something like different dimension ground, like these things that we're trying to floodgate, even if it's just for the turn. There's an out for it, but they feel like the middle finger to the end board, because it's like, I'm already going to make my 5 negates. I'm going to try to draw a bunch of cards. And I'm also going to figure out a way to try to floodgate you, so that way you're not able to win. But there is an out. There is an out, right? You can fall in the Virtuous, the anti-spell fragrance. You can Called by the Droll. This is Konami. If you're hearing me, this is kind of my plea. I personally feel like having more called bys to be able to play would probably be helpful to, you can called by the Shifter. You have to have the answer. And that is what gets so infuriating about Floodgates in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! What are the odds you have the answer? What are the odds you have a spell trap pop naturally in your deck? We're not all playing Fallen in the Virtuous. Do we have to? The reason we're all playing Ash, and there's a conversation I've been, having in my own circles and that I have seen other people having, is Ash even worth maining anymore unless you're going second and you're trying to Ash the Fua? Is stopping one search enough anymore in modern Yu-Gi-Oh? Or do we need to be drolling? Do we need to be having board breakers? Do we need to be having floodgates? There's an argument to be made if you've been seeing a lot of like the top decks, or if you're starting to see, if you look up deck profiles, I've noticed Ash is no longer in the main, because the idea of Ash is to stop the Fua. Because the idea of Fua, it's not intentionally floodgating you. It's not making it so you literally can't play the game. You can play the game, but how many draws do you want to give me in a game where resources are so important? It is a slippery slope. Floodgates are a tricky thing because people get so heated about them. I also want to point out that depending on how you are using a floodgate in your deck, goes from being like you're kind of being the a-hole player who's literally trying to shut your opponent out of playing the game, or I feel like floodgates are sometimes the only way that non-meta decks can compete, because Blitzclick kind of needs the Thunder King Ryo because I need to slow you down. So it's so interesting because you'll talk to people about their opinions of floodgates, and I feel like we all have when I get floodgated, I hate it. But when I'm playing a non-meta deck and I need to figure out like how can I, if I'm going to be maining Rivalry, which at one point I was, and I think that's when I was playing Fur Hire, and Fur Hire just didn't have the oomph that it needed. So you try to find a floodgate to help your deck feel more competitive. And that, I feel like, instead of getting mad at the floodgates, the bigger issue is the game. The fact that these meta decks go so fast, create a bunch of negates, create an end board that is often, the point is unbreakable. I feel like there's so many end boards where it's like, unless you draw the perfect hand or you side in, you've managed to bring a side that is perfect for that. There's games where it's like, yeah, you didn't have a chance of winning that one. You went second. You had, even 2 hand traps, but they played through the hand traps and they created an end board. And then if you add on a floodgate, it's like, it's super frustrating because all of us who play Yu-Gi-Oh, we like playing Yu-Gi-Oh because we want to play Yu-Gi-Oh. No one's sitting down with their deck being like, I just can't wait to get shut out. Floodgates make people feel bad when it happens to them. But if you're the person floodgating, depending on your reason for playing the floodgate, if you're playing the floodgate because you're just an evil supervillain like me who's maining 3 Dai-Fis and you're just like, this brings me so much joy, that's your reason. But also too, like in Malice, I felt like maining 3 Dai-Fis was the way to keep it competitive. It was the way for me, having there can only be one, doing Rivalry of Warlords. I was throwing in Secret Village of the Spellcaster into Fairy Tale. I felt like Fairy Tale, especially because if the Luna got ashed, if you know, you know. If you know anything about Fairy Tale Magistus, love it. The Luna got ashed, and I was like, well, this was great, folks. I'm going to pass the turn and go ahead and wombo combo, and I'm going to lose the game. So Secret Village of Spellcaster, which is a floodgate, because unless you control a spellcaster, so that's what I'm saying. Against some decks, it wasn't a great counter. Against Elf Note, Secret Village didn't really do anything because they are all spellcasters. But on the note of Elf Note, I don't feel the need to side in Secret Village. I don't feel the need to main Secret Village because Elf Note by itself feels like it is powerful enough for me to not have to run a floodgate in order to feel like I can potentially stay in the game and, knock on wood, even win something. So what do? I don't have an exact answer. I'm just gonna walk through the way I kind of, especially as a newer player to Yu-Gi-Oh, am trying to form my opinion around floodgates. One, accepting that floodgates are going to exist. They just are. And I really think trying to rationalize when someone plays a floodgate against you, I know it's a sucky way to lose. The worst way to lose a match is because you just vanity ruler, I can't special summon anything else. I hate playing against the chess engine. It's not even a deck. Angeliki is not a deck, it's an engine that people are throwing into stuff because, oh my gosh, it's basically a floodgate. It doesn't stop you from doing anything. I can play the game because I get 5 monster effects. Oh, but I'm going to get burned for 500 for every effect. And now you have those people who are playing double of the burn for 500. So you're getting burned for 1,000 anytime you try to play the game. But am I floodgating you? I don't know. You can still play the game, but you're probably going to KO yourself or not have enough. Like, I played into an Angeliki board on Lunalight. Lunalight, the combo deck that is just... So I think, one, realizing that floodgates are going to exist and realizing that losing to them sucks. Absolutely sucks. But it is out of your control to a certain point, because I think my second piece of advice is remembering not every floodgate is equal. There's such a thing as hard counters. And I think in Yu-Gi-Oh, so much of what the meta forms is things that can play through hard counters. Lancia is a floodgate for Malice. I didn't get to Lancia anyone at the regional when I sided it in because I played too many games against Invoked online, and I was terrified people were going to play Invoked. But that was my goal. My goal with siding in Lancia to go to the regional was if I play someone who plays Invoked and I Lancia them, have fun not playing the game. When I was playing Malice, the reason Shifter was in there because if I Shifter someone, here's hoping they're not on Mitsu. But I've shifted people on Mitsu and it didn't matter. But then I've also drolled people on Mitsu and that really mattered. So there is just such a thing as hard counters. And realizing what is going to absolutely stop you from playing the game. Yes, things like Vanity's Ruler that are you can't special summon. If you have a Fallen in the Virtuous and you can pop it, if you are playing Blitzclick and you have monsters that target to pop in order to summon themselves, if you I think one of the elf notes, I still have it open. How big is Vanity's Ruler? 2,500. I think there's an elf note girl that might be able to at least crash into it. Like, thinking of things like what, there are some that are harder to out than others, but there's certain floodgates that they're not all created equal. And so realizing when you are choosing a deck, there will be certain floodgates, there will just be certain cards. Cause do you think Droll's a floodgate? Riddle me that one. I think it leans more towards floodgate against certain decks than others. Some decks do not care about Droll. Some decks cannot play under Droll. Some decks can play around Fua super well. Some decks can't play around Fua. And I feel like when we have these conversations about banning these hand traps or not having these like crazy powerful hand traps, it's because they make you feel the way a floodgate does, but it's not a floodgate because it's not directly shutting you off from controlling more than one type of monster, but it is making it where like, okay, I got double Fuad. I know the nature of this game. I can full combo, and you're going to draw 10 cards, and you're going to beat me just by the nature of the fact that you're going to have so many cards in your hand. Decks will be countered by, there's a hand trap out there for every deck you want to play. There's a hand trap that's going to shut you off from playing the game. We can't fix that. We can't fix that. They're already there. Unless Konami decided to ban every hand trap and every floodgate. And even then, like I said, that is a slippery slope. Because I guess no one gets to play Invoked. I guess Angeliki's going away. I guess Omni negates. I guess the not hard once per turn, anything that's a soft once per turn. Like, it's fundamentally embedded in the game. Whether we like it or not, the idea of stopping your opponent either completely or just making it really hard for them to play the game, it's embedded in the game. And I bet if you're going second, you probably enjoy being able to have some way of trying to floodgate or stop your opponent. You evenly match them, and then you set up a board that they can't break with a floodgate, and they're going to exist. And counters are going to exist. So you need to figure out for your deck, what is going to hard counter it? Is there anything I can do? Are there additional pieces, additional engines? Should I be siding a small Fallen in the Virtuous package? Because currently in the meta, I need to be able to pop the Bastion in order to then try to Malong the Destrier or the Shatrangra, because I'm tired of the chess Angelic-y thing. Maybe you have to look into different things to side or main in order to try to ensure, right? Maybe you main Called By. You know what I mean? I'm a main Called By in Lunalight. I wish I could main more than one Called By. Just saying, Konami. Wish I could main more than one Called By, but I'm a main Called By in Lunalight because if you try to draw me, I cannot play the game. If you try to shifter me, I cannot play the game. Lunalight is searching and sending to grave. You shut either of those off for me, it's not going to happen. So just taking considerations of hand traps exist, and hand traps, I feel like, are the very closely related cousin to floodgates. How can I try to out them? How can I best play around them? But like I said, also remembering, sometimes it is what it is. Sometimes you lose the dice roll, and sometimes you get floodgated, and you don't win the match because they manage to get into the floodgate every single time. And I feel like we're playing in a meta where people are intentionally trying to figure out a way to search the floodgate, to search the stop for your deck. People want to have the anti-spell fragrance out, so help them. And that, like, I know that's like terrible advice, but like that just is what it is. Now, if Konami decided to hire me and they were like, hey, how do you think we can fix the problem of floodgates other than getting rid of every card? Now, I do have an idea. Don't know how helpful this would be. And obviously, I have no power to do this. But I think allowing us to have more than 15 card side decks. I feel like in the current meta, now you're always going to run up against the odd rogue floodgate. You can't prepare for everything, and part of the game is just realizing, and this has been a hard thing for me to learn as a new player, some games are unwinnable. It's a terrible feeling. It's what I was talking about in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Makes Me Sad video. It's really, really hard to get into a game and like the game and just have to come to terms with the fact that some games you can't win. Whether that be because of the meta, excluding the idea of floodgates, or whether that just be because you got floodgated out of the game. It sucks. It's going to happen. So, but for the most part, I feel like in every meta, in every current game state, there are hand traps, floodgates, and things that are more common than others. Like I said, I've seen a lot of discourse about people trying to search the anti-spell fragrance, right? There's, if you play online, you'll kind of start seeing the same floodgates that are going to happen. I think Angelic-y is a floodgate engine. I think the point of that engine is to again, I'm defining floodgate as turning the ability of your opponent to play the game off. I play Yu-Gi-Oh! Play Yu-Gi-Oh! I have floodgated you, right? The turning off your opponent's ability to play the game. That's why I think Angelic-y is basically a floodgate engine, because you are attempting to turn off your opponent's ability to play the game. So if we are allowed to have a larger side, then we can not only side for, here's my going first cards, here's things that are going to help me have more like consistency, here's things that are going to help me push for game, here's a little more engine. But you can also side, so like you can side in a Fallen in the Virtuous package, right? Because I personally feel like the hardest floodgates to get rid of are traps and spells, because most decks don't have trap and spell negates embedded. Especially not like an easy, like I can get rid of the floodgate in order. Like, yes, I can make Dawn Dragster and Elf now. But if I've already been floodgated by a spell or a trap, Dawn Dragster can't negate it. It's more just going to help stop the, you know what I mean? Like once the gate has been flooded with a spell or a trap, what do? Well, you return it to hand. You pop it. Now, monster floodgates are different because, especially on-field monster floodgates, you just hope you can crash into it or beat over it. We just go, like, I need to make a big baddie to come in and try to crash over it. Graveyard floodgates, things like Shifter, things that, like, go to graveyard, here's hoping you have the called by. So, I feel like there's a lot of decks that just can't out the floodgate. Do you think Chaos Angel is a floodgate? I was asked this question. And my answer is, yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes a light and dark Chaos Angel. Do you think light and dark Chaos Angel is a floodgate? Because I feel like these are the cards that when we're talking floodgates, we don't consider like, oh, when I make Chaos Angel, I'm using a floodgate. When you're making a light and dark Chaos Angel, don't you kind of think you're making a floodgate? Right? Because you'll hear people get on their high horses about like, no, floodgates, I don't like floodgates. Anyway, Crystal Wing, Dawn Dragster, light and dark Chaos Angel. Have fun. Pass. Anything in draw? Yeah. Anti-spell. Like, it just... Light and Dark Chaos Angel, there's a lot of decks that don't have the out for it. You have to get rid of it with a spell. Or have some way of getting into... Like, because even with a monster, it's not going to... You're not going to get rid of it with battle. It's going to be unaffected. Monster effect. Like, you have to figure out a way... So if you could side in a Fallen in the Virtuous package, you have an out. But most of us with a 15-card side deck are not going to include what is needed. Like, I think every single deck can run Fallen in the Virtuous. You just need the extra deck space and the main deck space. So if you can do it, a lot of decks already do it. But if you're looking at your side, might be nice to have in there, but like, what are the odds you're going to run into a light and dark Chaos Angel that your deck literally has no other way to out? I was playing Pearly, and I have my unaffected cat. Well, so I was playing Goddess of the Closed World. Goddess, Underworld Goddess. I have a shiny version, and I was going to read it, and then I was like, that's not in English. The Underworld, the White Woman Jump Scare. Someone was playing the White Woman Jump Scare, Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. That outs it. Lava Golem and Santa Claus, I feel like, are having a resurgence because they can out unaffected things, right? We're getting to a point. Monsters can be floodgates. They can be, if you can't out the light and dark Chaos Angel, what do? What do? You just make a board that you, like, the Chaos Angel, just, you put everything in defense and we just keep going back and forth and then we double loss? Like, what do you do if you can't out it? So if we had a more robust, that might not be the word, if we were able to side in more cards, okay? If we had, I don't know the exact number. I'm kind of thinking 25 card side. I know that's a lot, but like 15, I feel like the 15 is already hard because we want to be playing 3 copies. But it would allow people to just have the Lava Golems, have the Evenly Matched, have the Fallen and the Virtuous, have outs to these floodgate style things. Could also allow people to put in their own floodgates. I personally think floodgate v floodgate is funny, but it's not the answer. That would be my like actual, like, if it was like, okay, how could I think of a way to actually fix the game in terms of trying to help us feel better about floodgates and not feel like we literally cannot play the game, is having more cards on our side. But I mean, that's the thing too, is like, if you feel like your deck is going up against the same kind of floodgates all the time and it's not, sometimes it's going to happen and we can't plan for every statistical possibility. But especially I feel like if you're doing really competitive play, not even really competitive play, if you're doing competitive play, like when I went to the regional, I often feel like a lot of the floodgates, like I said, are really found in less meta decks because the intention is to, yes, stop you, but more like slow you down because I can't win on my first turn. So I need to slow you down so I have a chance, right? Yes, in very competitive and meta decks, some people do play Floodgates. And like I said, I think hand traps aren't that far off. I think they're not far off from it. But with the 15 cards we have, I think there are ways of like, the more that we start seeing the game evolving with each set that gets released, lava golems are becoming like a pretty common thing that people are putting in their sides. They're like Fallen the Virtuous is becoming a card that a lot of people are just trying to figure out a deck that includes it. We're going back to certain cards, we're adding in certain cards, we're doing things in order to try to continue to play the game. Because that, at its core, the issue with Floodgates is you show up to a game, you sit down, you're ready, and then you can't play. You literally can't play. For whatever reason, whether it's a hard counter, whether it's a real true floodgate that is just absolutely... That's the other funny thing is some people don't know how to play through their own floodgate. So if you're ever playing online, don't concede. Depending on the floodgate, some people don't know how to play through their own floodgate. So there's that little tidbit. But yeah, sometimes it floodgates both of you, floodgates one of you, and you just can't. And it's a really sucky feeling. But the floodgates should get banned. We shouldn't have any floodgates. The game is ruined. We need to not have any floodgates. Konami just needs to ban every floodgate. I don't think that's the solution. Because I think less meta, less powerful decks need them to slow down the quick pace of the more powerful meta competitive decks. And I also think so many things are floodgate adjacent. It's such a slippery slope and such a gray area because, like, yeah, do you think Joel's a floodgate? Do you think Light and Dark Chaos Angel's a floodgate? And you might be like, yes, ban both of them. Okay. Like, what about Fua? Yeah, ban it. Okay, we're going to start banning everything at that point, babe. And we can't really just completely, like, we can't make a new card game out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's already what it is, and we're going to have to do our best with it. So I think, like I said, recognizing the floodgates exist, and it's a sucky feeling, and just, it's part of the game. Right? Preparing, looking at your deck, and going, okay, what is going to stop me from playing, and is there anything I can do? Because you also got to remember, too, they either have it or they don't. 40 cards, you're drawing 5. If you're going second, they're getting their 6th one, right? If they're going first and trying to set up an end board that has a floodgate included, they got 5. You know, the ability to search floodgates is... maybe you draw the ash. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much statistical probability, improbability in Yu-Gi-Oh! That, like, that's what I even think, too. When I play decks like Fairy Tale, they either have the ash or they don't. And I'm going and saying, you don't have the ash. And you know when they don't have the ash for the Luna, feels great. If you're playing Rollout or Mitsu, you just have to have the mindset of, like, they're not going to draw the droll. They're just not. Sometimes they do, and you're like... But a lot of times, they don't. A lot of times, they don't draw the shifter. They don't draw the Di-Fi. They don't get into Vanity's Ruler. Like, it's... I feel like floodgates... you have to work for them in a sense, unless you draw them. Like if they draw the trap that they set on turn 1 and then you get, you know, tikabooed, I don't know what to tell you, but they have to have it. And so also thinking through, are there things that stop your deck? Is there anything you can do? If it's going to bother you, if your deck dies to droll, is it worth you still playing it? And you might go, no, because I get mad because I keep getting drolled. Pick a different deck. There's so many decks. I really do think if we were allowed Konami to have a bigger side deck, I think then we could plan for more and then at least feel like maybe we had a chance. Like maybe we didn't draw the out to the floodgate, but we at least had it in the deck and it felt better than knowing that I literally had no chance against this. But this is kind of, like I said, also a bigger conversation of where we are in the meta and just having a lot of non-games. And that's a whole other can of worms. But in terms of floodgates, those are my thoughts. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So yeah, that was me yapping about floodgates. Thank you for joining me. Let me know your thoughts. I really think it's such an interesting conversation because often when we think floodgates, we immediately think like Di-Fi, Tikaboo, they're gonna, you know, tyrants, the whatever, the angry, the one that looks like the Captain Underwear Pants book thing, and he's like, and it's a I don't remember what it does, but I don't like that one. We think of those. But I really think if we truly stopped and we're like, what do I already play that is trying to get my opponent to not play the game? And on a bigger sense, if you're going first, what's your goal with your end board? Is it maybe. Is it perchance to get your opponent to not actually be able to play the game? I think it's the current state of Yu-Gi-Oh! I understand why floodgates exist. Yes, they're frustrating. Yes, sometimes they suck. I think they are going to be here, and I think there is just things we have to do as players and as we're making decks and as we're thinking through what we're choosing to play and how much it's going to impact us and how frustrated we're going to get at the game that we love, because we want to play the game. We want to have fun. Make decisions that are going to have you make you have fun, right? And if you're not having fun, that's the thing to assess, because floodgates are here to stay. I do think my idea about side decks would be great, but I have no power in that. So that's just an idea that I'm throwing out in the wind. Let me know what ideas you would have if you were trying to fix the issue of floodgates. And if your idea is ban all of them, then yeah, that is a valid idea. I think because that is Chaos Angel. But yeah, thanks for joining. Love yapping with y'all. And we'll catch you on the next one. And here's hoping you go through games without getting floodgated this week. Sending you anti-floodgate vibes. Catch you on the next one.